kick off our first Raising Eagles session. My name is Ashley Croson. I'm the Director of Community Services here at Allen ISD. And with me on this panel also is Christy Alexander. She is our Family and Community Engagement Liaison. Before we do really get into this session, I want to talk to you a little bit about Raising Eagles. It was formerly known as Parent University, and it aims to engage and inform parents and caregivers as partners in their child's education. This school year and school years to come, we plan to offer various in-person and webinar events throughout the district. So you won't see them just at district locations, you'll see them at campuses across our school district. In Allen ISD, we strive for our graduates to be effective communicators, responsible and engaged citizens, good problem solvers, and academically prepared for their futures. We will be sending out quarterly newsletters covering different aspects of our graduate profile. So keep an eye out for those and feel free to contact us if you have any questions. Today's webinar features Ron Ferguson, who will discuss how to help our children thrive in school and life. Ferguson, an MIT-trained economist, teaches at Harvard Kennedy School and leads the Achievement Gap Initiative. His current project, the Basics Learning Network, supports parenting through 5 key practices. His book, The Formula, Unlocking the Secrets to Raising Highly Successful Children, is a great read. I'm reading it myself right now. I'm trying to help myself as a parent of 3 kids. And we'll actually be doing a prize drawing for a copy of his book at the end of the session for all of those who complete the survey. So now I am going to stop talking and I'm going to hand it over to Ron.
Great, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm hearing an echo on my side. Oh, just stopped. I think I'm good. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm a father myself. I raised 3 boys, one by birth, one by brother, and one by adoption. I say I raised a nephew, and we adopted my youngest son. I'm also a grandfather and have a big network of nieces and nephews. And so the work that I'm going to talk about today is not only professional, it's also personal. And for all of us, because all of us have families and all of us want our children to grow up to be, not just grow up to be the best that they can be, but to experience life fully even while they're growing up. I should say the book that I'm going to talk some about today, The Formula, Unlocking the Secrets to Raising Highly Successful Children, was co-authored with Tasha Robertson, who is a journalist, and we were equal authors on the book. I'm also going to talk about some additional ideas about parenting and raising children and child development. And I invite your questions. If you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we will probably answer most of them at the end after I talk for a while, but there's a small chance that I'll be interrupted once in a while to answer a question. The first point, and maybe the most important point I want to make, is that every child is unique. If you've got more than one child, you know that they are very different from one another. And children are like little bundles of potential. We don't know how they're going to turn out. And how they turn out depends a lot on what we do. We don't have total control. They each have their own personality. Each of us needs to be a student of our child. Just like at work, we kind of get to know the personalities and figure out what to say to who, when, to get what we want, or to get them to behave in particular ways. The same is true of our kids. What works with one may or may not work with the other. The other point that's important to keep in mind as we raise children and prepare human beings more generally is that everybody can't be in the top 95%. Only half the people can be in the top half. Somebody's going to be in the bottom 5%. And we don't have total control over where our children end up in that distribution, but life is not just about competition. Life is about experiencing the world, experiencing life fully. And so our mindset should be that we're trying to prepare our children to be the best possible versions of themselves, not necessarily to win some race that only a few people can win. There can only be one absolute winner. There only can be 5% of the people in the top 95%. And so wherever our child seems headed, cultivate that to help them be the best possible version of themselves. there is a saying from Reverend Dr. Robert Schuller, who I used to watch a long time ago. He's long deceased, but one of his memorable sayings was, "Any fool can count the seeds in an apple, but only God can count the apples in a seed." The apples in a seed are that latent, unharvested potential that come about as a function of how well we cultivate the seed, whether we give it the right amount of fertilizer, the right amount of sun, the right amount of water. And so it's about, again, cultivating our children to be their best selves, not necessarily to be in the top X% of any distribution. The topics I'm going to cover today, I'm going to start with just a definition of how to think about success. Now, it'll be a pretty quick thing, but it's something to have in mind as we go through the rest of it. Then the fact that there are no throwaway ages. There is development to be done at every age. And I'm suspecting that on this call, we probably got people who have brand new babies and folks whose children are graduating from high school this year, and maybe even past that. So there are people in the communities that span all these ages. And if your own children aren't of a particular age range, you might have relatives who have children in any given age range with whom you can share relevant information. I'm going to talk about the roles in the master parenting formula that Tatcha Robertson and I extracted from interviews. We interviewed a few hundred people about how they raise their children. And these people were folks whose children are super successful, sort of in the standard ways. I mean, about half of them are Harvard graduates, other concert violinists, political leaders. And the question is, how were they raised? What did their parents do as they were growing up? But in addition to that, I just want to give you some tips for effective parenting that are relevant no matter who you are and what your child's achievement level might happen to be. So let me launch into this. First, the definition of success. I talk about a fully realized human being and the idea that a fully realized human being is a person who's got enough brain power, enough smarts to do what they want to do, but also they have a sense of purpose. There's some things that they've decided to get done, to do, and they've got the get up and go, the agency to do it. Agency, a simple definition of agency, is the opposite of helplessness. Somebody who feels helpless knows what they want to do, but they just feel powerless. They sit, they don't do anything, they remain idle. Someone who has a sense of agency gets up and goes after it. Okay, and so if you're a person who is smart enough to do what needs to get done, you've got a sense of purpose, so you have an idea of what you want to get done, and you have that get up and go, that sense of motivation, the agency to actually do it, you've got a good chance of becoming a fully realized human being. Even if you don't totally achieve all of your goals, you've experienced what it feels like to live, to pursue important goals. And we think about what we want for our children. We want them to learn in school, to develop their brains. We also want them to find their purpose in life. And we want them to take the initiative to go get it. The idea that there are no throwaway ages, just to, from birth to 3, children's brains develop hugely. The brain doubles in size during the first year, from about 30% to about 70% of adult size. By the time they're 3 years old, it's 80% of adult size. By the time they're 5 years old, it's 90% of adult size. And most of my work these days is focused on an early childhood initiative that's called The Basics. You can learn more about it at thebasics.org because early childhood is so important. But then those early elementary years, or actually the preschool years from 3 to 5, are the years when children learn some socialization, how to get along with other children. They start learning basic preschool skills like their numbers and sounds. 5 to 9, they learn to read, so later they can read to learn. They learn basic math, so later they can use math in science and other kinds of courses. 9 to 14, they start to take on a sense of identity. Who am I? How do I fit into the world? Who are my friends? How do people like me or not? And so there's a lot of social turmoil that often happens, but it can go very smoothly if children have the friends who are supportive and families who are tuned in. Then 14 to 18, they're preparing to make the transition into adulthood. They are deciding what courses to take, what kinds of hobbies to pursue, who to hang out with. Then from 18 to 21, 22, they're actually making the transition into adulthood. And then 22 to 30, they're becoming fully established as adults. And there's developmental work to do during each of those time periods. And if we don't get the work done well during each time period, there's some catch up to do. It's always best to get it done the first time through rather than have to do catch up later. But the point is, some people are waiting for the teenage years. So when they get to be a teenager, we'll really get serious about whatever. But during each period of life, it's important to think, what's most important during this period for my child to accomplish and to be tuned in. And the fact that you're on this webinar right now suggests that you're the type of person who does tune in and who does try to be a student of your child and figure out how to do what you need to do at the right times. And obviously, our book, the book with Tasha has been mentioned, but there are lots of other books. There are things you can read. There are webinars you can watch as you continue to be a student of parenting. This is a picture of what the book looks like. And the idea when we did the project was that we were really curious to know what it is that parents do that leads children to turn out like they do. And most of the time out in the world, we don't see in other people's homes. And so it's like a black box. You see a baby's born, they're in the black box of their home and their other experiences. They pop out as an adult. And we want to open up that box and understand what kinds of things happen inside it as children mature. I'm going to fill in this diagram. I know the print's going to be kind of small, but I'm going to fill it in as I go along here. We call it the master parenting formula. As we did these interviews, we discovered that there were 8 types of things that families did that came up in almost every interview. And when one of these 8 things was missing, there was also often a little bit of a hiccup, a little bit of a problem to be overcome. So, and we started the interview simply by asking, if we were talking to the young person, we would ask them, what's your earliest memory as a learner? If we were talking to a parent, we would ask, what's your earliest memory of your child as a learner? And then we would just pull their story out of them. And we started off with no preconceptions about what we were going to find. We did these interviews, and after a while, we started to see the pattern. The pattern was that these same roles came up in almost every conversation. Different ways that they played out, but the same topics came out. And so as I fill this in, you see on the top, you see in the band, it says success qualities that master parents cultivate. And those roles are going to have to do with things that parents do that cultivate certain skills and qualities, ambitions, and orientations in their children. On the bottom,
Ron,
yes.
I'm sorry. If you're sharing your screen, we can't see it.
You can't.
We cannot.
Oh, thanks for telling me. I've been assuming you were watching as I was going along.
Well, we thought you were about to, and I'm like, oh, I think thinks he's sharing. Okay.
Let me quickly show you the screen. Let me quickly show you the screens you didn't see when I was going through. Okay. I started here, and then when I was talking about how each child was unique, this was what was on the screen. And then from there, I went to the topics, the definition of success, no throwaway ages, roles in the master parenting formula, and tips for effective parenting. And you can see my screen now, right? And then smarts plus purpose plus agency produces fully realized human beings. That's the idea. And that's the core definition of success. So we're not talking about your kids only successful if they make a lot of money or if they become a doctor or a lawyer or a professional basketball player. Okay. They're successful if they've developed the intellectual horsepower to do what it is they need to do in order to fulfill their purpose. And they've got the initiative, the energy, the gumption, the courage to do what it takes to achieve that purpose using those skills and to become fully realized, right? And so that's that core idea. And so and then this is fully realized human beings. You've got the birth to 3 with the brain development, the 3 to 5 with the preschool skills, 5 to 9 with learning to read and learning math, the 9 to 14 taking on a sense of identity and how you fit in socially, a 14 to 18 preparing to become an adult, the 18 to 22 actually making the transition to adulthood, and the 22 to 30 actually arriving in adulthood and becoming fully established. So those are the slides you didn't see as I was talking through and assuming that you were coming along with me. But thank you for speaking up. And this is the book and the image of the black box and the the infant going in is an infant and popping out the other end, ideally is a high achiever afterward. And so our goal with the book was to understand more about how high achievers were raised. And we learned a lot, and that's what I'm about to tell you a bit more about. Okay, so the master parenting formula has the 8 roles in it that I talked about. Okay, and you see success qualities that master parents cultivate. I'm going to fill in some boxes right under that bar up top. And then opportunities that master parents ensure. And I'll fill in some things there that all lead to highly successful adults. So let's jump in. The first role in the formula is the early learning partner. And this is the parent is an active, engaged partner in learning when the child is ages birth to 5. In almost every story, pretty much in every story, the parents had stories to tell about the kinds of things that they did with their children beginning in infancy. There's a lot of research on the importance of serve and turn back and forth communication. You know, a 2, 3, 4-month-old can make a sound trying to get an adult's attention, and just going back with sounds in a serve and return way is important developmentally for infants. But a lot of our parents told us stories about the games that they enjoyed playing with their children. And usually it was built around something that the parent actually enjoyed. It could be building things. It could be making up stories. It could be certain ways that they played together in the yard. But there were lots of stories about parent-child interaction that essentially led to the child developing the sense that life is all about learning. That's what you do in life. You spend time with adults doing stuff that's fun and that you learn from. And so by the time these children started school, they had learned that that's what life is all about. And a teacher is just one more grown-up that you learn with. Okay, it was nothing new. As opposed to sometimes you might have had families, not so much in our sample, but who figure they'll learn when they get to school. And right now, as long as we feed them, make sure they get some sleep, we're in good shape. The footnote on that is that it's not about being a teacher. Sometimes people say parents are the first teacher. That's sort of true, but the kind of early childhood teaching should happen mostly in the context of play, where the child doesn't feel like somebody's trying to instruct them. It's just they're having a good time and they're learning things as they go along. The second role that really pops in and becomes important when school starts, and actually all the rest of the roles are always important throughout the age span. So the only one that's really age defined is the early learning partner. And it's not that each parent plays only one of these roles. Parents play all these roles, but they're woven into everyday life, so it doesn't seem like a task that you have to do. The second role is the flight engineer. The flight engineer on a spacecraft knows everybody's job. And if anything starts to go wrong, they jump in and try to set things right so that the spacecraft doesn't go off course. So you can think of life as a journey, and you want to keep that journey on a high trajectory. And if anything happens, it might throw it off. You want to make sure you correct that so the learning can stay on a high so the life and development can stay on a high trajectory. And so the stories here were stories about ways that parents were vigilant about what was happening with their child when the child was away from home, mostly at school. And it's not about being a helicopter parent. A helicopter parent is always hovering. They're too involved. They're too close. And when you're a helicopter parent, it prevents your child from developing their own independent relationships, from developing their own independent problem-solving skills. And so sometimes a flight engineer parent, if something was going wrong at school, for example, the parent would not necessarily automatically go up to school and have an argument and try to persuade people to set it right. They would often coach the child on what to do to set it right. So the child was learning problem-solving skills in the process. If it was something that the child couldn't do, then yeah, the parent would get involved. Sometimes you had kindergarten, first, second grade teachers mistreating kids. You'll find that sometimes if a child is super skilled, super bright, they will do things that are uncomfortable for the teacher. And sometimes teachers don't always respond appropriately. So there was a child who, as a kindergartner, would always shout out the answer whenever the teacher asked any question, which meant the teacher couldn't engage the other students because this one child was being disruptive by answering all the questions. And the teacher put the child behind a partition in the building, gave them some things to do on their own, and basically excluded them from the class. And that went on for a long time before the parent discovered that that was what was happening. Once the parent discovered it, she went up, she expressed some anger, and she let the teacher know that that was unacceptable. And to make a long story short, they skipped this child to the second grade, after which everything was fine. But there are lots of things that happen that are unfortunate, that if the parent knows about them, they can intervene and make sure that things go along smoothly. And ideally, you want to have a good relationship with your child's teacher, which does also mean doing your part to keep your word on things that you tell teachers you would do. We recently did a project with teachers where teachers were often very upset that parents don't keep their word in that bargain between teachers and parents. So that's the flight engineer. The role comes after that, and this is after it in the way we think and talk about it, but it's really going on simultaneously, is the fixer. And you see the print on the screen says the parent finds resources and removes barriers to ensure that doors to opportunity are accessible and remain open. And this is about understanding what your child's interests are. What are their special skills? What are their interests? And how do you find opportunities to help them to cultivate and build on those skills? And maybe different things you might have. A son is interested in ice skating or interested in building little robots or whatever. The daughter may be interested maybe in building robots too, but if not, maybe in something else that may be more gender related, maybe not. But it's a matter for each child. There are things that they are intrigued by. So we want to discover those. And we find that most of the young people that we studied, by the time they were 7, 8 years old, they had passion projects. They had things that they were interested in, not because their parent told them to be interested in it, but because they had been exposed and because they had some goals of their own that they were working on. And it was the role of the parent to support them in those passion projects, to find programs they could be involved in, tools that they might need in order to carry those out, encouragement to continue with those passion projects. And that's what the fixers are mostly doing. Then the next role is the revealer. And the revealer basically exposes children to life's menu. All the different things you can be interested in, places you can think about going, types of people you can grow up to be. And so the revealer will introduce the child to people who have the same interests that the child has expressed. Or they'll take the child on field trips to museums or other events that are related to what the child is interested in, or not related to what the child already is interested in because the child doesn't know about it yet. So when we talk about giving the child support for their passion projects, the revealer has exposed the child to a number of different things that they could adopt as passion projects and helps the child to develop a sense of their future selves. There's a phrase that I like, possible future selves. We want our children to imagine what they might want to be when they grow up, or even if they're really young, what they might want to do as an adolescent or a teenager as they grow up. But the stronger is the image that people have of their possible future selves, the stronger is the sense of purpose that they will have. The more structured and organized their lives will be, the more they will have targets to express the agency that I talked about when we talked about being a fully realized human being. And so, again, the revealer here on the screen, awareness of adult realities and possible selves. And the adult realities part is an important piece just to mention, insofar as life is not always easy. there are challenges that can come along. And so partly being a revealer is partly about also helping your child to anticipate difficulties and to prepare to cope effectively with those difficulties, to understand that stress is just part of life, and we have to learn to manage it effectively. The next role is the philosopher. The philosopher is a parent who takes the child seriously as a thinker from the first moment the child can express a thought. And so we're talking about parents who, from the time the children can start asking questions, 2, 3, 4 years old, you take the child seriously. You don't just give them a throwaway answer. You think about what it is that might be both understandable and useful to the child as an answer. I think almost everybody we interviewed said, my parent never treated me as a child. And what they mean by that is that their parent always took them seriously. So obviously their parent didn't use words that were too big, too advanced for the child to understand. But the parent assumed that the child had the ability to think, to reason, to make choices, and cultivated that from very early on. I have a 3-year-old granddaughter, and I'm amazed at how good my son is at helping her to understand why what she wants to do might not be the best thing to do at that moment, and redirecting her attention and getting her to reason through his reasoning for doing whatever he's trying to persuade her to do. And she does have a point of view, and she feels totally confident in expressing it. And obviously, but also if she did so too disrespectfully, would be, coached on why that's not how you talk to daddy, or that's not how you talk to mommy, all right? And doing it in a tone that's always friendly and understanding. I understand why you feel like that, but we need to think about this or that, right? And so the philosopher helps the child as they grow to develop their own ethical compass, their own sense of direction in life, their own tendency to be thoughtful and confident in their own thinking. Then the next role is the model, who shows the child here ways of being and ways of doing, how to carry themselves, how to do certain types of things. Okay. Very often the young person in an interview would say, yeah, I always wanted to be like my dad because my dad, and then you fill in the blank. I always wanted to be like my mom. And so we have to be aware that children are always watching us. They're also always watching other people. And you also have to be sure that your children don't choose the wrong people as their model. And that becomes a bigger concern as the older they get. Even as toddlers, though, there will be peer dynamics. There will be peer pressures. And my 3-year-old granddaughter decided she wanted to wear dresses because other girls are wearing dresses. Okay. You may note that I'm a person of color. The race issues came up already. One of her classmates said, you're not pretty because you're not white. Okay. And so she came home from preschool, said that happened, and said, I want to be white. Okay. And we had to have that conversation. And that's an ongoing conversation to try to help your children be comfortable in their own skin and respect other people for being comfortable in their skin. Okay. And so part of what we want to coach children on is how to have a positive identity at the same time that they have respect for other people's identities. And there's not a lot of that in our book, but it's a dynamic that did come up. I mean, there are a number of places in the book for people of color and whites that racial issues came up. They were never the dominant issue, but they're just among the issues that we all have to cope with and work on as we go through life. The next role is the negotiator. Your self-discipline, skilled self-advocacy. I think of the negotiator as the child who's learned that the parent who is a negotiator is teaching their child to speak truth to power respectfully, to get what they want from people who have power and influence. one young man said, if I wanted something from my parents and I couldn't explain why I should have it, I may as well not even ask for it. And so he always was required to explain why the parent should go along with any particular request that he was making. There are also examples of when parents coached children on how to negotiate with a teacher. Rather than the parent going up and trying to convince the teacher to do something that the child wants, the parent coaches the child on how to do that with the teacher. Okay, and then finally, the GPS navigational voice. And this is different from the others because this is not something that the parents explicitly do or pay attention to strategically. This is just the outcome of all the rest of it. The GPS navigational voice is the parent in this child's head after the child is away from the parent, particularly as an adult. But even while they're growing up, you figure that when the child is away from home and they've got to make a decision, there are voices. There's mom's voice and dad's voice and other people's voice in your head coaching you on how to make that decision that you have to make as a young person when you're away from the family. And so a lot of ways we are building that GPS navigational voice as we guide and parent our children through the years. So with this all together, you see all these roles in the formula come together to help cultivate the highly successful adult. Again, the successful adult who has a sense of purpose, who has developed their own abilities, who has that sense of get up and go and initiative to make things happen in their own lives. And so what the book does is it weaves in and out of people's life stories to tell these stories. Tasha is a journalist. She's also a novelist, and she kind of taught me how to do narrative writing as we went through. And so the book is not just a straight linear. It goes back and forth in people's life stories, and it weaves in the roles. And so I think you'll enjoy it just almost as a storybook. At the same time, you can extract ideas. We also, for each role, we reference the research literature that pertains to the issues in that role. And so there is a deep research foundation that's very academic in nature, but that basically validates the idea that these are important things that do have important developmental outcomes for children. But I want to move from now to talk about just a number of other research-inspired tips, some of which will overlap with the formula, some of which are not necessarily in the formula, but that are things that are healthy to do. They may seem like common sense, but I just want to give you the list. And if you're taking notes, I'm going to go kind of fast, but some of these just are important things to remember. First one, promoting daily leisure reading at home. Just the habit of reading on your child. Sometimes you're reading to the child. If they're a young child, you're spending time with books. But the children who do best academically just develop the habit of reading. And you don't have to buy a lot of books. Go to the library, borrow books from the library. The second one, getting enough sleep, trying to be sure your child gets enough sleep to not be sleepy at school. And you can consult whoever about how much sleep your child needs. But being sleepy at school is not an unusual problem for children. Being sure they eat breakfast. Children who are hungry in the morning also don't do as well at school. And then expressing warmth regularly. And this varies a lot across families, how much love and warmth they express to one another. But spending time together, listening carefully to what your child has to say, like the philosopher does in the formula, responding thoughtfully and sensitively, hugging them, telling them you're proud that they're good people. So I'm not just proud that you got good grades. I'm just proud you're a good person. and proud that they try to do their best, that you love them, and allow them to help set rules when appropriate. Don't be so bossy. Ask the kid what's their perspective about the rules that they'll take. And we find that children develop pretty much the same values that their parents do. And so they're not usually going to come up with some outlandish thing that they want to do. And then balancing warmth with structure and demandingness. This means having clear and firm rules about doing homework and asking for help when they need it. Some children, particularly those who are insecure, won't ask for help. And so we need to encourage them to ask for help. We need to be sure we treat them well when they do ask for help, but also encourage them to ask for help from other people. Television watching, not all the time, just managing it, finding other things to do. When our kids were young, my wife used to complain sometimes they were watching television too much. I said, well, we got to help provide something for them to do other than watch television. People do use the television as babysitters. And these days, they use it more, also use computers and other technology as babysitters. A footnote on the technology: it's better if the technology is interactive, where the child does something, there's some response. It's least effective, least useful if the child's just vegetating and watching something that they're not interacting with. Trying to help make sure the child has friends who respect your values. And particularly as they get to be adolescents, children use their friends to advise them on immediate, right now kinds of decisions. They use their parents and grown-ups to advise them on longer-term decisions. So when your child seems to be just paying too much attention to their friends, they're not tuning you out on the idea of what they may need to do long-term. You want them to graduate from high school and go to college and save money and do certain other kinds of things. But what their friend is trying to get them to cut class or to copy homework or to exclude some kid who's unpopular, those are all things, or to accept their own position as a low status person in the peer group. We're this and you're that. Okay, I'm reminded at the Democratic convention last week where Kamala Harris said her mother always told her, don't let other people define you. Don't let them tell you who you are. You show them who you are. Really, that idea, because kids will define one another. And particularly when there's so much social media interaction these days, helping your child to prepare for that, to have the courage that they'll need.
Hey, Ron, we had a question real quick about what you're talking about. Someone asked that my kid watches too much TV. Is there any way to move his interest to something else, or advice?
Yes. Engage them in conversations about what they're really interested in, what they get most excited about. Figure out if there are certain types of TV that they watch and they're most stimulated by, and figure out if there are activities that they can engage in that will help to address those same types of issues. If they're watching music videos all the time, maybe get them some electronics so they can produce some music, so they can make up their own beats, so they can record their own voice and listen back to it. Have them find ways for them to be a producer of whatever they're interested in, not just a consumer of it. And also to accept the idea that it can be a hobby. They don't have to do it competitively. They don't have to try to be better than anybody else or win, but just you want them to do things where they are engaged in a way that they are moving toward an outcome, right? Experiencing what it feels like to make progress toward a goal, right? And so I think that, and so you don't want to tell them what they're watching is stupid. You want to tell them, if you find that interesting, there's some things that you can do that will help get you even more involved with it. So let me keep going. Maybe we can come back to some of these issues in Q&A. I'm going to try to rush through now so we can have time for Q&A. So time to be at home, not letting kids stay out where you don't know where they are. Chores and responsibilities. It doesn't need to be a lot of chores. One of the mistakes that we made raising our kids is we didn't give them enough chores. We had housekeepers that would come in once a week or so and clean things up and do things. If I had to do again, there would be at least a few responsibilities that they had to do regularly every week. The way they treat their siblings. Older kids don't realize how important they are to their younger brothers and sisters. And the younger brothers and sisters are copying them and making sure that they are good role models and treating, following the golden rule, treating their younger siblings the way that they would want to be treated. respecting adults, and then bedtime on school nights, making sure they have enough sleep. Then discussing reading materials in ways that encourage children to enjoy learning. So not just reading a book straight through, but having a conversation about it, getting engaged with what's in there. During bedtime reading, ask questions, easy questions to build confidence, more difficult questions to help them learn to reason, doing it lovingly. Having a variety of reading materials for children, especially materials that are related to the child's special interest. For little kids, often reading the same book over and over again until they almost memorize it for preschoolers is a good thing to do, but also having some variety, because children get exposed to things through books that they don't get exposed to in everyday life. Okay, there are lots of kind of animals or kinds of places where their worldview is expanded, and when they get to school, teachers will start using references to things as the context for the learning. And if the children who have not had any exposure to elephants and giraffes or islands or airplanes or whatever, they won't know what the teacher's talking about. And so some of the work I've done in schools suggests that sometimes children are confused, not because they don't understand the concept, but they don't understand the context, the things that the teacher is talking about as examples as they're developing the teaching. Constantly reinforcing the idea that learning can be fun and stimulating and fascinating. Don't overemphasize getting things correct. Emphasize effort and comprehension. When our kids came home and had made a mistake, it was not, why didn't you work harder to get it right? It was, what didn't you understand? And if you still don't understand it, what are we going to do to get you to the place where you do understand it? It's not about the grade, it's about understanding. It's about effort. Seeking opportunities at home to discuss and apply what your child is learning at school. Okay. For example, having help with cooking and recipes is a good way to reinforce elementary school math. The discussion of current events in the newspaper may connect to what your child is doing in social studies. Ask teachers for ideas that you can use to connect home life to school life. Because otherwise, school life can just seem like irrelevant stuff that you talk about at school. It's got nothing to do with the real world. And so we want to help make those connections to the real world, to give kids a story they can tell themselves about why they're paying any attention at all. It's more than just about getting grades. Seek out a school time opportunities for tutoring and reinforcement if your child needs it, lessons, extracurricular opportunities for freedom to explore and be creative, develop their special talents. Know your child's close friends and try to know their parents. The network of relationships between parents can be important, particularly among adolescents. Okay, because your kids are being influenced by their friends. Parents can come together to have some collective influence on that. Encouraging your child to think about the future and to set goals, help them develop the habit of planning for both near-term and long-term goals. Okay, the habit of planning is one we usually don't teach our kids. Okay, so where are we trying to get to? Okay, we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, we're going to do this. By next April, we're going to be here. Just not necessarily locking it down, but just being planful and developing that habit. Substituting, we talked about this a minute ago, substituting constructive activities for television watching. Building your child's sense of being a valued person. Avoid using negative nicknames like you little dummy or knucklehead or lazy bones, good for nothing. Instead, more supportive names. My father used to think it was affectionate to call us knuckleheads. And that hurt every time he said it. I didn't like being called a knucklehead. He did it affectionately, but and try to end every reprimand with a positive statement that lets your child know that you have separated your disappointment about their behavior from your pride about what a good person they are. Okay. Sometimes we reprimand our kids in ways that make them feel like you don't like them or you just think they're not a good person. Okay. And so just one thing I want to toss in just right at the end here that may be of interest to some folks. There is one set of ideas about what good parenting is common in places like Korea and China. It's referred to as the Tiger Mom. Amy Chow has a book called The Tiger Mom. And Tiger Mom was not happy if the child wasn't the number one kid. Okay, you have to be the best in your class. I've had Korean students tell me you had to be top 95%, otherwise you were a nobody. So it was okay not to be the best at gym or drama class, but when it comes to academic studies, you got to be the best. They did not get to choose their own extracurricular activities. The mothers say, no, you're going to play violin, you're going to play piano, you're not going to do soccer, you're going to do whatever else. You were not allowed to play TV or watch TV or play computer games, hardly ever. And getting any grade less than an A was not acceptable. And those are things that the Tiger Mom insisted on. On the other hand of that, master parents had the same general concerns, but they gave their child more freedom and autonomy. And so instead of insisting your child's got to be the best at everything, you encourage them to be competitive, to compete, but especially compete with their own past performance. And not being number one is okay if you did your best. Then encouraging passion projects of their own choosing. Okay, if they decide they want to do something other than what the parent wants to do and they're learning and it's constructive, that was okay. Although they limited television watching, they did not prohibit it completely. Television after homework was okay often. You got everything else done you need to get done? Okay, you can watch some television. So, well, the Obamas were in our book with their daughters. They only allowed television watching on the weekend. But one way or another, there was some structure there. Nearly all the high achievers were straight A students, but their master parents were okay with a less than perfect grade as long as they believed the child did their best. We were studying people who were super high achievers. Often they had siblings who were not super high achievers. And even for those siblings, if they did their best, it was okay. Okay. One dynamic I'll mention before I just unshare my screen here is that in families where not all the children are super high achievers, the children who are not super high achievers will often be discouraged by the idea that they just can't keep up with that. You know, my sister is really smart, but I'm not. My brother is a top student, but I can't, even on my best day, I can't do that. So I'm not going to even try to compete. And what would happen would be the other siblings would often have lower academic aspirations than they would have had if they had not had a high achieving sibling. Because they devalue their own goals in that domain. And so what we want to do as parents is to try to calibrate what each of our children's best work looks like, what effort looks like for them, and support that, and let them know in ways that are not too overt sometimes, that we're not expecting them to do the same thing their brother did. That's him, he does that. This is you, and this is what, you know, I'm super happy about when you do it. Right. And also just letting siblings understand that we're all in this together. We're all supporting one another. We're not competing in the household here. All right. So I'm going to unshare my screen now and just invite any questions that folks might have.
We have some. I will read them to you. Somebody asked, do you or your research suggest a certain amount of screen time?
That's a question that always comes up, and I don't have a good... The best answer I ever heard for little kids was to use screen time the same way you use a book, and for about the same amount of time. That you have a purpose. Once your purpose is done, you move away from it. But for older kids, that doesn't work. I think if the screen time is interactive, they're actually learning something. It's part of some kind of a project. There's some goals involved. That's good. I know social media can be addictive. I mean, we've all kind of experienced it. You always want to just click just one more, and you go from one screen to another. And after you've looked, it's a lot of time has passed. And so common sense is usually a good guide for these things. So I don't have any better answer than just be thoughtful. And I think your kids also have a sense of that, but they often need help finding alternative things to do. It's like, well, I got nothing else to do. Well, let's help you find something else to do that you'll actually think is fun too.
Okay, we have another one. It says, how do you balance encouraging excellence while identifying complacent attitudes?
Um, if somebody is complacent, it's often that they are not inspired by the alternative, right? Either they're not inspired by it, or they don't have what they think it would take to actually do that and succeed. There's a little framework that I find useful for thinking about this kind of topic. First, somebody needs to have a purpose or a goal, something they want to accomplish. They're still going to be complacent if they don't have a strategy for pursuing that goal. So if they got something they'd like to do, they need a recipe. They need some steps they need to take, or the strategy, or a recipe to do it. Then they'll still be complacent if they don't think they have or can acquire the resources that they need in order to implement that strategy to achieve the goal. And then they'll still be complacent if they don't think the rewards that will come from making the effort to assemble the resources to implement the strategy to pursue the goal are worth the effort. And the most important goals are on fundamental human motive dimensions. And there are three human motives that tend to pop out of most research on motivational psychology. The first one is a sense of belonging. People want to feel like other people like them and want them around. And so if you're going to be doing something and it's going to be lonely, it doesn't contribute to a sense of belonging. If you're going to be rejected and not welcomed into the group of other people who are involved, it doesn't contribute to a sense of belonging. So finding ways that people can engage in things with other people who will like them and welcome them and be friends. So even having a parent express interest in what the child wants to do in a way that tightens the parent-child bond can contribute to that particular kind of reward from the sense of belonging. So not just go find something else to do instead of watching television, expressing some interest. You're really good at X. I haven't seen you do X lately. You ought to do it because I'm curious what would happen if you spent some time on that. You know, just having it be part of the relationship with the child that goes along with it. The second fundamental motive dimension is competence. We all want to be good at something, okay? And we run away from things we think we're not good at or can't get good at, okay? So you want to find things that children can do that they already feel like, hey, I can do that, or that they feel like, hey, if I work at it a little bit, I'll be able to do that, and I'll feel good about the fact that I got better at it, okay? A sense of competence. And so sometimes our kids aren't doing things because they're psyched out. They don't think they have this, they're smart enough to do it or strong enough to do it. And then finally, a sense of influence and empowerment. People want to have influence. They want to affect what other people do, right? And so if you've got a child who you never take any of their advice about anything, you never listen to their ideas, then they feel like they got no influence. Or they feel like, or if the people that they would need to rely on to do whatever it is that they could alternatively do, if those people would ignore them or not pay any attention to them or not take their advice, then there's no payoff to that, right? And so people gravitate to opportunities to be loved and embraced and feel a sense of belonging, to feel competent, to feel empowered and influential. And if we can create opportunities that generate those kinds of returns, where the resources that kids need to do it are there, where the strategic recipe kind of ideas are there, then they'll find something else to do. That's when I talked about the passion projects that tend to come on early on for kids who tend to excel.
Okay, thank you. We have quite a few more questions. How to lead a correct direction for the teenagers on the boy and girl friendship?
That's the role of the philosopher in the formula. Have conversations with kids about friendship and the choice of friends, and what it means to be a good friend, what it means not to be a good friend, what it means for a friend to be a positive friend. One thing I used to ask kids is, what would you, 25 years from now, you might have a 15-year-old. What would that 15-year-old want you to do right now? Okay. What would that 15-year-old want to know his mom or his dad did today? What if you were the 35-year-old, what advice would you give? What would your 35, 40-year-old self give to your 13, 14, 15-year-old self? Don't take my advice, take your own advice. Because you know what the right answer is. Okay. And the friends that you're hanging out with today, you may or may not even know them by the time you're 18, 19, 20 years old. But whatever you do today will have impacts on your life by the time you're that old. And so it's reasoning with your child, being in conversation with them because they know the right answers. But they're feeling pressured by their friends. I just talked about how the sense of belonging is important. If you don't do what your friends do, you get rejected sometimes from the peer group. You lose a sense of belonging. Sometimes the things that your friends want you to be good at or competent at are skills that are mischievous. You don't need to be good at that. Okay. And so just being thoughtful about being their best self, becoming a fully realized human being in the domains, in the directions that they even really want to do that. And so, again, as opposed to just trying to impose your will on them all the time and tell them to do things you want them to do, get them to have a conversation with their own future self. And their own future self will generally give them the right answer.
Thank you. Okay, the next one, in lower primary grades where there is no homework, how can we keep those kids to thrive academically?
Reading at home, finding out what they are interested in, and then finding opportunities to do that. Talking to your child and maybe sometimes your child's teacher about what they're learning at school, and then find things you can do at home and in the community that reinforce the lessons about what they're learning at school. Whatever math they're doing, you can find ways to do it out in the community. How many trees are there on both sides of the street when you put them together? If we chop down those 3 trees over there, how many would we have? If you planted that many trees on every lawn all the way up the street, how many trees did you have altogether? Just throwing out questions as you move around the community.
All right. The next one says, I know I am not a great teacher helping my son learn math reading tricks. At what point do you recommend hiring a tutor or going to an education center that I see all around town? He is in 2nd grade.
My first instinct is you don't want to go spend a ton of money on this kind of things. If the child is doing fine in school, get some books from the library that they can use to practice some of those same skills. Encourage little projects at home that they can do. If it's skills that you don't have, you also can be a learner. Okay? We don't stop learning just because we're grown-ups. There are online resources. There are various ways that we can learn to help our children more. I bet you if you Google, what can I do at home to help my 2nd grader with math? If you search that on the internet, you're probably going to find some little videos and some things. If you go on YouTube and just search on YouTube for ways I can help my 2nd grader with math. Now, we don't always have enough time to do that, but just weaving it into the conversation when we're already going to be with them anyway. And also have your child tell you about what happened at school. And I used to ask my kids when they got home from school, what's the best thing that happened today? And then you could say, what did you learn today that was fun to learn? What did you learn today that was no fun to learn, that you wish you didn't have to learn it? And just, those interactions. And if you are really have a strong feeling that your child needs some tutoring, find it. You can find it from professionals in the community. You can also find it sometimes from older children in your extended family. or in the neighborhood. And if you give your child working with an older child, they can report to you on how well it's doing. And if it's not going that well, they don't have to keep doing it. But the fact that you're a parent and you're being vigilant, you're trying your best to find the resources, just trust yourself as long as you really are doing your best. This.
All right. The other one, my child does not have any friends in school. How do I encourage him to make friends?
Being the best possible version of themselves, being nice. Okay, if your child is really nice and they don't have friends, that's a problem with the friends. That's a problem with the peer group that may have little cliques that hang together and don't welcome children as much as others. Another possibility is to encourage their teacher to have a few more group activities and to monitor the peer dynamics in those group activities. Be sure that children are respecting one another. Sometimes doing one-on-ones in a classroom, sometimes it's called turn and talk, where kids turn and compare notes and talk with the child next to them. And if there are children that they seem like they might want to have friends and seems like there's a chance at it, maybe if there's a child or two, find out how to get in touch with the child's parents and maybe invite them over for a sleepover or for an afternoon play date. Our kids used to have play dates a lot with other kids. And so it's sort of matchmaking, but it's not really just sending your kid out to make friends, because that's often not going to work that well, other than them just being nice to other kids and trying to be very helpful to other kids. Sometimes the adults need to kind of do a little matchmaking and provide opportunities for kids to interact with one another and get to know one another better, and a little policing of that dynamic. So if you try to bring kids together and some kids are acting as bullies or not being nice to each other, we need to intervene very quickly in that to set it right and to teach empathy. Okay, all of us need to teach our kids to be more aware of how other people think, how other people feel, and to have making other people feel good as a goal that we have, and to feel good about ourselves when we can make other people feel good.
Okay, we have a couple more. It said you mentioned getting to know your children's friends' parents.
Right.
However, what do you recommend if those parents aren't aligned with your type of parenting style or rules? Do you force the friendship because the kids are friends?
First of all, you might interrogate your own parenting style and rules to be sure that it's not too inflexible. That sometimes we're so arrogant about our own style of parenting that we're not tolerant of other people's ways of parenting. And so ask yourself what it is about the other people's style of parenting that you don't like, and decide if you can tolerate that. If you can't tolerate it, then you can't. But then you also have to decide if the other parent's parenting style is so bad that you can't tolerate it, then there might also be an issue with your kids being friends with those folks. Okay. Now, sometimes what we're talking about is the social class dynamic, where we're feeling we make a lot of money, we live in the big house, they don't make much money, they live in the little house, and we don't want to associate with people like that. Okay, if that's the way you feel, you need to get over it. You need to understand that we live in a diverse world, that your children associating with children who come from less well-off backgrounds is not going to drag your child down. It's going to help your child learn that the world is diverse, that there are lots of different kinds of people in the world. They live different ways, and we all live together in the world. And so there can be mutual learning. Children from less advantaged backgrounds can learn from children from more advantaged backgrounds, and vice versa. One of the recent findings in the national research is that children from less advantaged backgrounds do better lifelong if they live in mixed communities where they have access to families from more advantaged backgrounds. Because the children from less advantaged backgrounds learn things about life possibilities, about the world, about strategies that help people rise up and do better economically and in other ways in the world. And so most parents, pretty much every parent wants to do the best for their kid. Not every parent has every resource that's necessary to have them do everything. There are a lot of great stories about ways that parents have mentored other people's children. Okay? As long as you're respectful of the other families, sometimes inviting children to come along on outings or to participate in activities where they get exposed to things they might not otherwise have been exposed to, it can be a really satisfying and really impactful thing to mentor somebody else's child. And if you do it in a way that is respectful of the other parent, they will be thankful for that. You know, if you do it in a way that's disrespectful of the other parent, they will be resentful and they'll pull their child away and cut that friendship off and not allow that to continue. But each of us needs to be introspective about that, to figure out, why do we think what we think? There's a whole field called metacognition, thinking about thinking. And how do we help prepare not just our child, but other people's children too? How do we work as a community to be better in life? I'd like to say we're not preparing our kids to compete with each other. We're preparing them to compete with the world. And so we need to help to raise the entire community to thrive.
Thank you, Ron. Last question. My college boy told me he lied to me and he was really off track as a freshman. He is now powerless and has no motivation to work on anything. How can I help him?
You need to go back, figure out what really interests him. What about the world would he like to see different? Find ways to help him find his mission, his sense of purpose. Okay, we like to say that if you think about every human being has some ways that they're going to impact the world, some ways they're going to make the world a better place, and they're the only ones that are going to do it. And so there is a uniqueness to each of us where we have our own North Star. And our life's mission is to discover what that North Star is and to live it out. We can be in a position where we feel like we're behind everybody else. Everybody's better than we are at everything. And we've got a young man who's discouraged and directionless and unmotivated. Is that he doesn't know his North Star. He hasn't imagined what that can be. And finding it and starting to work slowly in the direction of it is where he needs to be. We talked about the revealer as being one of the roles in the formula. Finding ways to expose him to things that he can do. Also finding ways to have him let go of things that he has decided that he's going to be a failure at. Because it may have been some things he was always interested in, and now he's reached a conclusion, it's never going to happen, I can't do that. And if that's going to work, he's dead in the water. Just, what I do now. And so not everything is going to work. There are some things that people may want to be or do. I mean, I don't know how many people I've ever heard thought they wanted to be a doctor until they hit organic chemistry. And then after organic chemistry, they say, well, I guess I'm not going to be a doctor, and they went some other direction. So it's a constant search. It's not unusual. It's not abnormal to be stuck at certain times, to feel unmotivated, like you don't know what step to take next. But being reminded that it's a search and it's not a competition. And it's about figuring out what you want to do in your life and moving off in that direction. And if you do that, you will find that there are things that you have done with other people and for other people that would never have gotten done if you hadn't done them, that add value to the world and that are part of the payoff to the effort that you've put in as you developed yourself into the person you become.
Okay, we have we have quite a few more that popped up. Do you want to I'll send those to you, you answer them, and then we can send them back to the individuals, or did you want to keep answering on here?
Let's go for 7 more minutes. Let's go to quarter
Okay.
after the hour.
Got it. Okay, let's see. Any piece of advice for a parent of a 6-year-old kid who is still learning English to increase his level of confidence?
Keep reminding them the things that they know and can do now that they did not know and could not do a month ago. Giving them a sense of ongoing progress. You just keep going, 1 foot in front of the other, one extra word in your vocabulary, and letting them know that their parent has confidence that they can do it. Okay, they may not think they can do it, but I know you. I've been with you for 6 years. I've seen you do so many things. And think of all the things you can do today that you didn't think you could do before. I have a son who struggled through school. My youngest son struggled through school. And whenever he would tell me he couldn't do something, I would say, I have no reason to believe that, because the stuff you told me you couldn't do last month, you could do now. Okay. And so I think that is life is about learning, and enjoy feeling good about the milestones you've passed and knowing that there's still more ahead.
Thank you. Okay, and let's see. What do you advise your teenager who has noticed their teacher's lack of interest in actually teaching their class? Teachers are our kids' role models as well. This affects a student in many ways. How do we handle a situation like this?
We might talk to the principal and let the principal know that your child perceives that the teacher has a lack of interest in teaching their class. And you don't want to make enemies of the teacher by approaching them directly to do that. But you might want the principal to let the teacher know that there is that perception in their class. You might encourage your child once in a while to take an idea into class, find an article in the newspaper or something else that suggests their own interest in the topic. Sometimes teachers can develop a lack of interest if they think the students have a lack of interest. It's like, why should I work hard if my students aren't going to work any harder or tune in anymore if I do? And so it's a two-way street. But I think talking to the principal about it, maybe not even writing it down, just having a phone call with the principal, telling them literally what your kid said, and having your child express interest in the class can do that. It's hard for a teacher who's not interested to totally not respond to a child who's expressed interest, or who's asked questions, or who's read something extracurricular outside of the classroom and brings it in and says, well, I read this. How does that relate to what we talked about, 3 days ago?
Okay, last one. It says, my son is 16, soon to be 17, and he has just come to Allen, and it is a huge shock coming from a district that was not as organized and allows us to keep a closer eye on him. He makes a lot of excuses, and I am concerned about what kind of adult he will be, because it feels like he just doesn't get how important it is to ask questions and work closely with his professor. What do we do?
Yeah, that's when you're new and you come into a place, you're worried about what people think of you. You don't want to ask a question and have people think you're not smart if you think you might be getting the benefit of the doubt already. Or if you don't think you're getting the benefit of the doubt, you don't want to ask a question and confirm to the person that you're not smart, if that's what you think they thought. Okay? And so it's totally normal that if he comes from another school district where the preparation wasn't as strong or the competition wasn't as great, and he feels like he's behind the other kids, he wants to fit in with the other kids, he wants to be perceived as just as smart as anybody else. Sometimes the saying is, for some kids, it's better to look lazy than stupid. That you don't look lazy and you're asking a question, but then people say, oh, he's stupid, he doesn't know that. It's better to just act like you don't care. That way, at least you get the benefit of the doubt that you're okay. Okay, and so I think there is part of it is helping your son to understand that it's a transition process. There's nothing wrong with him. That you part of the reason you live in this community now is it provides more opportunities for him to become his best self, to learn more, to thrive academically. But there's a transition process because he's starting off in classrooms with kids who've had more opportunity than in the past. But if you take the best advantage of the opportunity you have now, gradually you'll catch up. And you don't have to ask questions in front of the whole class. You can wait to after class and ask a teacher. You know, you can tell the teacher, well, some of the stuff we talked about today, I've never even heard about before. Is there something I could read to catch up a little bit? Or what advice do you have for me to do better on this topic? And so it almost becomes a little project that the child and the family take on about how do you help the child to catch up academically, and how do you help the child to sustain their sense of confidence as they move through this process, with the understanding that as they move through this process and work hard and catch up, they'll be better positioned for the next set of opportunities and challenges later on. But it's totally human nature to want to stay quiet, to want to hang back, to want to be invisible if you think you can't keep up or the other people might not think well of you if you start to ask questions and show what you don't know. But teachers in particular know that children have different backgrounds. They've not all had the same opportunities to learn. And so they should be very receptive to a child who asks for some extra work even, or some extra tutoring. And if a teacher is not receptive, that's another conversation to have with the principal.
Okay, one more did pop up, and we'll wrap it up with this one.
All right.
It says, my 10-year-old son is interested in violent games. How can I motivate him to play healthy games?
Maybe motivating him to play healthy games is not the answer. Maybe there are two parts of the answer. Maybe one part of it is actually getting involved with him, learning about those violent games, and celebrating with him as he reaches higher levels of those games. But at the same time, having conversations with him about the nature of violence and about the ways that violence undermines the quality of our lives. You know, there are contexts such as in war where violence is a survival skill, where we survive because violence is used at appropriate times and places. Competition, football, hockey are violent sports, where being aggressive contributes to your ability to win. At the same time, you don't have to become a violent person and have a violent personality. You need to be able to put things in their proper context. And so talking about empathy, for example, in everyday life, not necessarily in the context of the game, but just letting the child know that I, as your parent, want you to enjoy yourself. But I worry about you becoming the person who enjoys violence for the sake of violence and often uses it at the wrong times and places. Okay. How can you assure me that you're not going to use violence at the wrong times and places so I'll feel okay about you playing that game? Because otherwise, I like to see you succeed, reach higher levels. Great, good for you. But I want you to be the kind of person who's going to add to the world in a positive way. And, talk to me about this. Make the case. Explain to me. Talk about the negotiator in the formula. Let's negotiate this. Let's have this conversation. And if I'm okay with the conversation, you can keep playing your violent games. But I need to know that you understand the value of love and peace and cooperation and empathy and helping other people and adding positive value to the world. Tell me what you do in your everyday life to make life better for other people. What have you done in the last week or two to make life better for your friends or for the rest of the family? How important is that to you? If I know that that's important to you and you really go out of your way to do that, I can live with you doing these violent games. Otherwise, if that's the kind of person you're becoming and you don't care about this other stuff, that's not good. We can't keep going in that direction.
Well, thank you so much. I put a survey in the chat for people to start filling it out because we are going to do a prize drawing for one of your books. And so we purchased several. And so we have another session tonight at 5:30. After that, we will pull some numbers or some names, and we'll be able to provide your book to some of our attendees. So that's exciting because
and the people who don't get it as a gift can go on Amazon or any place else and find it.
Yes, they can. It's very easy to find. But I do want to point out that I asked them, I said, what topics of the webinar did you find really valuable? And many people said the master parenting formula. And so if they truly feel that way, they will find your book to be absolutely incredible, incredible support for them. And so because I've started reading it, I just want to throw in a few things. I feel like as a parent myself, I'm always feeling like you got to keep up with the Joneses, right? Like, am I doing enough to support my child? Am I putting my child into enough activities or the right activities or with the right teams? And what it talks about is truly doing your best to support your child and knowing your child, taking the time to sit down and talk with your child and find out about their interests and listening to them and, giving them the opportunity to choose their own extracurricular activities versus forcing them into their own, a path that you maybe didn't get to fulfill yourself. I found so many parts of the book to be so interesting. And another piece, you don't have to be super wealthy to raise your child, for them to grow up to be super successful. Just taking advantage of the free resources in your community and taking them to the library and exposing them to books and having conversations about those books. Maybe they're going to learn, maybe you can't afford to take them to, Japan or, wherever, but you can read books and research and talk about those things together. So anyways, the book is absolutely fascinating. I can't recommend it enough. But I'm thinking that from our survey, we might end up doing a book study. So I love when we can have these conversations and find out other people's needs and interests, and then we can work on those as a community together. So thank you so much. If you haven't filled out the survey, please make sure you do that. We do have some upcoming events on September 18th. We're going to host advanced academics opportunities at the secondary level. That'll be targeted really towards our 6 through 12 new to Allen ISD families. But our next really big event is going to be on September 24th. We're going to host Community Engagement Night at the STEAM Center. And many of you have heard Dr. Ryan Smith present in the past. He's coming back. He's going to host 2 sessions, and they're both going to be about how to help your child be an effective communicator. We have heard you, and we know that you would like targeted age group sessions, so we are doing that. We'll have one session which is targeted towards parents of students in grades K through 6. That'll be titled Raising Kind Communicators. And then we will have one for grades 7 through 12, which is going to be geared towards empowering teen communication. So we hope to see you guys and connect with you at our future events. And thank you again so much for attending. If you want to hear it again, we'll be live again at 5:30 p.m. tonight. We will also be posting this recording onto our website. Any final words from Christy or Ron?
I think the book study is a great idea. People have done that before, and it gives people lots of opportunity to tell their own stories too.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, well, we appreciate you. Thank you all for joining us today. Have a great day.